Welcome to a new panel. In this case, in the second day, we have the agenda very full of interesting topics and interesting themes and technologies that we cover today. I'm Francisco Piccolini, Open Source Community Manager, and we are going to have a new panel. In this case, we are talking about the alternatives for open source for virtual machines. With me will be Benny Vasquez from Alma Linux, Neil Hanlon from Rocky Linux, and Simon Coder from Oracle Linux. And here I am, your moderator from Open Nebula. Just before I let everyone on stage, I would like to thank the IPCEI. This panel in this conference is possible thanks to the support of the IPCEI-CIS project, which is the next generation European platform for the data center cloud edge continuum. So having said all the acknowledgements, I'm gonna invite to the stage to Benny Vasquez, Simon Coder, and Neil Hanlon. Ideally, at this point, since people already know me because I already have a presentation a couple of hours ago, I'm gonna let everyone introduce themselves, starting with Benny, obviously.
Obviously, right? Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I love working with you guys. This is our second time together, I think, right? I'm Benny Vasquez. I'm from the Alma Linux OS Foundation. I am the chair there. I also chair our marketing SIG, so I do a lot of public stuff. So I'll go to events and I'll write lots of blog posts and that kind of stuff. I have a history in web hosting, so sysadmin is my heart. That's what I do. At the core of me is diagnose problems with like I'm fighting a computer, and I'm a huge Star Wars dork. So that's pretty much all you need to know about me.
Good to know. Well, the next one should be Neil, because we are going in alphabetical order. That's why you were the first, Benny. No other reason.
Makes sense. You got to sort some way, and alphabetical makes sense. I'm Neil Hanlon. I am a board member at the Rocky Enterprise Software Foundation, as well as the Rocky Linux project within that. I work for CIQ, who's one of Rocky's sponsors, and I'm one of the people who have found Rocky at the beginning, and I do a whole bunch of stuff, a bunch of different special interest groups, and involved in various upstreams, and try to do as much as I can without letting anyone down.
Okay, and Simon.
Yeah, and my name is Simon Cotter. Joined Oracle around 20 years ago, and I'm part of the product management team for Linux and virtualization at Oracle from 9 years now, I think. Started with Linux, I think was 1995, maybe. And it's been always my passion, right? And as soon as possible, I try to also get a job within Oracle on Linux. And this is why I'm today here.
Interesting fact that I'm checking now is that we go alphabetical in both orders. Backwards as well, because if you check the surnames, it's Vasquez, Hanlon, and Cotter. So it's kind of this is completely unconscious. Yeah. It's perfect. Okay, I'm gonna start with the panel because no one wants to hear my bad jokes at this point, and especially you guys. The situation is that we want to discuss a little bit the situation, obviously, with the virtual machines and what are the options in the ecosystem. So basically, I would like to start with not the first question that we have, but the third question that we have right now, which is the current situations with the RHEL alternatives, specifically with CentOS. Funny thing is that this week I was speaking with a person from Red Hat. He was in charge of Kubernetes, which is, they are kind of independent from all that shitstorm that is happening. But I would like to understand a little bit why the necessity of having alternatives to CentOS mainly, and why we are having this discussion about RHEL specifically. I don't know who wants to take the voice.
Not it. No, I'll go first. I don't care. Sure. So when Red Hat announced that they were ending, I guess almost, what are we, almost 4 years ago now, just over 4 years ago. Red Hat announced that they were ending the downstream distribution of CentOS Linux that we had all come to rely on over the last 15 years. It was immediately apparent how massive that community was, right? The community of users. I don't know if Red Hat could have understood the scope of the impact of the change they were making. I think that they certainly understood how big that ecosystem was. They're not going to make an uninformed decision, right? But the number of industries, the number of people, the number of organizations that relied on CentOS for its livelihood, whether it's the libraries that have taken over or have migrated to an alternative, or the museums that use a Red Hat based system as a point of sale system. Like, all of these organizations, obviously, yeah, there are businesses too, but these people needed an alternative that didn't need to be updated every 2 years like it does with CentOS, with a CentOS Stream. CentOS Stream is a great thing. Like, it does good things for the ecosystem. It improves Red Hat and all of us exponentially, honestly. But it does have a much shorter lifespan, and there are lots of other reasons not to use that. And so for the people that needed something that was CentOS-like, it became very apparent that we needed to fix it. And we all appeared.
Yeah, next one, Neil, because I think that I will leave Simon for the closing of this question, because probably it's a different perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think Benny hit the nail right on the head there, right? Like, there were so many people that used and learned Red Hat style Linux on CentOS. That's how I got my introduction into Linux kind of professionally, was in actually the web hosting industry as well. It's interesting how many people in this weird community of people that like distribution building got their start in web hosting in some way. But there was, for me, it impacted my job, the changes there, and I knew there was going to be some impact on. There were, the changes there, as also said, like, are really great for the community, and it opened up this really great pathway into contributing to something that was otherwise, you had to become a Fedora contributor, hopefully contribute things there that would be picked up in RHEL later, maybe, if you were lucky. And now there's, not only a pathway, but actual examples of folks from Rocky and Alma and Oracle and everywhere else contributing to that CentOS Stream pathway, and having a really great example of how to develop enterprise Linux in the public.
Simon?
Yeah, that's true. I agree with both Benny and Neil. And to add even more, I think that CentOS did something great for Red Hat, right? So CentOS, due to the fact that CentOS was there for the community, took so many people to then adopt RHEL, or Red Hat Enterprise Linux, on other systems or other solutions or production environments, right? And yeah, CentOS has been great. Because for any developer, for any kind of ISV, we're going to develop something for RHEL, right? All of those had always access, right, to a 100% binary compatible release where to develop, while being sure that the same application will perfectly run on RHEL. So this is also why I think that CentOS did a great job for RHEL itself, and I also didn't understand why they decided really to kill it. On the other side, yeah, it's true, CentOS Stream is great, but even Fedora is great, right? What is not really understandable is the kill of CentOS, right? Someone could think that maybe they were just targeting to get at least a small percentage of those CentOS users moving to RHEL. But even there, CentOS did and could do a great job for them. And today, I think that this kind of decision from coming from Red Hat, yeah, in my opinion, took all of us in a better position than in the past, because seeing a collaboration there between other enterprise companies like the Alma Linux OS Foundation, CIQ with Rocky Linux, Oracle with Oracle Linux is really great. And so the OpenELA creation, for example, is really great. SUSE is even there, right? And seeing those enterprise companies working together to keep their a CentOS alternative, a CentOS free alternative is great.
Yeah, no, that's what I want to comment a little bit, just to give a little bit of context in open and to self promo. In Open Nebula, we have several options in the marketplace. We have not only Alma Linux, Rocky Linux, Oracle Linux. We have also Ubuntu, which no one mentioned here. I don't know why. It looks like there's a kind of a denial on that part. Honestly, I prefer don't make me talk about it. But also we have SUSE. So there's a really solid alternatives, and I agree with you, Simon, that the situation it's right now it's the situation is that we have a better position right now than it was perhaps 5 years ago or 4 years ago when Red Hat says that it's going to be ended. So I have two topics to start with this conversation, and I don't know, I'm hesitating on which one, but the first one that I have, it's between the situation with the license, which it's a little bit connected with the Red Hat situation. The situation with the licenses, I mean, it's something that we need to be worried that there will be more movements from companies like Red Hat or HashiCorp that changes completely their licenses and it will be against the users, or this is something that is completely punctual and it's it's happening because of the market situation or the competitor situation. What do you think on that? Let's go with Neil. Yeah, Neil nodded, and so if you nod, you go.
Yeah, I think that one of the things really that happened for everyone after the CentOS Linux changed to CentOS Stream and whatnot back in 2020 was it woke up everyone who was using not just CentOS but open source in general to the fact that hey, this might not be a thing that is available to us, and what can we do to future-proof ourselves to not have to deal with this from a business continuity perspective. That's where actually, I mean, Ubuntu has come up a lot in Debian as well. A lot of people have just been I'm going to go over there instead. And there's other examples of, well, I'm just going to hedge. I'm going to go CentOS, Stream, or Rocky or Alma or all and something else like Ubuntu or BSD or whatever the case is there. And that I think is part of it now that has changed some of these market conditions in that the relationship between the open source communities and products that are being offered and supported by commercial entities and those that are using those open source things in a non-commercial aspect or place, it's just kind of fundamentally changed because of everything that has gone on with changes to CentOS Stream, the HashiCorp relicensing, people trying to make a business out of open source. And we're, I think, seeing a lot of resurgence in that right now more than we had in the past because of a lot of these changes. And I'm not saying Red Hat precipitated this or caused it to happen, but it certainly is a market factor in that change that I've seen.
Mm-hmm. Simon, foreseeing changing?
Yeah, in my opinion, coming also back to your initial question, in my opinion, obviously I cannot comment directly on what took, for example, companies like HashiCorp applying different license type or whatever.
Yeah.
But what I think about those open source solutions is the one that you can always work in two different ways while working on a product that is open source, right? And there's one side And I'm for example, I'm seeing also this with VirtualBox, right? On one side, there's a community, right? And you have to work with the community users, and also understand from them which one are their possible requirements on something. And then on the other side, obviously, there's also a business side of your open source solution where maybe your customers are going to pay for the support and so on and so on. And if you're able to build both of them, right, you shouldn't need, right, to apply a different license and force, let's say, those users, those community users, paying for a license while leveraging your product, right? So if you correctly build both of those sides, the community one and the business one, at one point you will be in a good shape, and you will not need, right, to apply different license to try to get someone more paying you, right? This is my personal opinion. Obviously, I'm not saying that this is what took, for example, HashiCorp applying a different license because they only know which one is the main reason, right? But I also think at the same time that with a proper community and business model applied to an open source project, everything can stand up without forcing anyone to pay.
Totally. Thanks, Simon. Benny?
Yeah, I think another way to look at it is it comes down to the motivation for the company choosing open source in the first place. Like if they believe in the ideals of open source, of freedom of software, and the requirements that that come along with committing to be an open source project, then you're not going to see as many. Those are not going to be the license changes. If you are seeing, or if they enter the open source world because they want to leverage a community and are hoping to get contributors that will give them free effort and free labor, and they're approaching it from that perspective, those are especially the ones that you're going to see more motivated to change licenses, because they're worried about where the money is coming from and where it's going, and specifically, even if it's not the people who are making the decisions around the project, the people who are funding it or who are benefiting from it, where that money ends up going are the people that they ultimately answer to. And those are the kinds of things that will influence whether or not you're going to see a license change.
Yeah, totally. Fair. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, basically, I think that we all agree that open source, it's fine in terms of the philosophy behind and all that. But in the end, the open source projects needs to be developed as well. It's a question of, okay, the money needs to be, the project needs to be funded and needs to be supported in one way. And money is one of the biggest ways to develop and be able to, improve things, create infrastructure around a project and stuff like that. So I'm usually, I started in the open source project, not like Simon too long ago, but we are almost, I think that I'm a little bit older, or I have more gray hair than Simon, that's for sure. But when I started around 21 years ago, there was, this dream of open source, it's free and available for everyone. And then you discover that it's not so free, mainly because if not, people cannot eat, basically cannot survive. So that's gonna take me to the next question that I always love to say when I have people with me that are supporting open source in this way. And the question is a little bit, okay, we are using open source, we are good people. That means that you're a good citizen? This is a good question that Neil brings to the table, and I think that it's a good thing that we can start talking about, and I think it's still connected with the topic of the panel. So I don't know if Neil, you want to take the lead on this again?
Yeah, I'm not sure if this was me that put this in, or maybe it was Benny.
No, it was Benny. Oh, sorry, it was okay. Benny. Yeah, okay, sorry. Sorry,
Benny. Yeah, exactly.
I counted the lines in a bad way. Yeah, anyway.
I think being being an open source or good open source citizen is more than just using it, and it's also more than as Benny was saying too, right? Like the motivations behind what you're doing with it and why you're trying to engage with a community. Like, are you trying to engage with a community in literal just like engaging with them, or are you trying to engage in a community in a way where you're trying to get free work or get more things out of something? Like it's sort of a gray and blurred line in a lot of ways, but it for the people that are part of the projects and that are looking at these things from the outside, it's very not gray. Like it's very much like there's these two polar opposites of like, is a company good at it with open source, or they get bad at open source? And it's ultimately, it has to be like a spectrum. There are times where a company is better at open source than other things, and there's areas where they're better at it than other places, but there's areas where they do bad things or they misstep, and it's about how they react to those changes and move forward. I think that is more important than any single event in its entirety. But I think being a good citizen of open source is using it and also being bold and public about using it. Like that is helpful to projects more than I think people understand. And that's something I've fought with jobs over the years for, just acknowledging the fact that an open source solution is being used, that it's powering your business, that it's making you, that it's allowing you to feed or pay your employees so that they can feed their families, right? Like there's a real powerful message in there that I think is overlooked. And so I think being part of a real open source citizen or good open source citizen is using it, and even if you can't contribute back to it with engineering or money or engagement with that community, you can still support it in a host of other ways.
Right. Yeah, I agree with Neil. I think that it's a give and take, right? And obviously, if you are not an engineer, your give could be a feedback, right? Could be to talk about the open source solution and how much you are happy about that and the results you have got with that. Yeah, it's a give and take. So obviously, there's the community, and as already said before, there's the business side. I think that for an enterprise company like Oracle, CIQ, or Alma Linux, obviously there are also business targets, but the important thing is that those business targets are going to get back into the open source project, and all the possible enhancements we are going to work on are going to get available to everyone for free, right? That one is the important thing. So while looking at an open source project, you can have many different companies with many different targets, right? From the business point of view, working on that open source project, and each of them doing an improvement that obviously could be maybe focused on their business requirement, right? But at the end, they're going to improve the open source product. That one is the give and take I see in any open source project.
Okay. That's right. Yeah. Benny, you're the last.
Yeah,
Sorry.
they've done a good job of covering most of the stuff that I like to recommend to people. Like, you have to talk about it if you're using it. That's the most important thing, and it's the easiest thing for people to do and companies to do. It is so impactful to just put your hand up and say, we use this. And it makes all the difference, both for the people who are working on the projects actively and for the other people who are, whether they're companies or individuals trying to evaluate a project. If they see that you're using it, it makes them feel better. Like, it makes them feel more secure in that project. There's obviously the funding it. If you're a company and you're using open source, it is your job to support that in a way that provides resources, whether it's actual cash money or it's people or it's for an operating system. For us, it's setting up a mirror or just upstreaming any fixes that you make. Whatever you're doing, the operating systems that are based on us, we're getting contributions from them upstream, either in Alma Linux or in CentOS Stream, because we send them there because that's where it should be, right? that kind of stuff is the kind of stuff that you cannot put a dollar value on for us. And then also, obviously, test the products and report your bugs. Report your bugs. If you know that there's a problem, report it. Don't just work around it, report it.
Good old times of localization, translation of documentation, eternal documentation. That's so. Yeah, that's so old at this point.
The feedback is as important, for the negatives, the bugs, as it is for positives, right?
Yep.
Like, we want to hear more feedback, and that's what we were getting to at the beginning, right? Like, it really does make all the difference when you come and just say, "Hey, this worked really well," even if it seems mundane. I know I stress out whether things are working, right? So if upgrades work, let us know. It's really great feedback to have, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. Which this is a good kind of a connection, the link with one of the questions that we have around here, which is how people can contribute effectively to open source, and specifically in this case, we are talking about virtualization. So virtualization projects, how these projects can promote or embrace community engagement. I don't know. I think that I have two options right now. I can start with Simon, and he can start talking about his experience on open source projects, or Benny. Up to you. Who goes?
I can start. Yeah, I can start first. So on virtualization. So in the virtualization, there are more great, and let me repeat, great open source projects, right? We can mention some of them. Overt is one of them. Proxmox in another one. Zen hypervisor, KVM hypervisor on Linux. All of those are open source projects supplying you a stable and reliable virtualization platform, right? How you can contribute there? So in my opinion, leveraging the same, testing the same, using the same, provide your feedback, right? This is working, this is not working, or this service seems to be slower while running on KVM compared to another or whatever proprietary virtualization solution. Those are the feedback we are looking for, and those are the feedback that can really take the open source virtualization growing. That said, I also want to add another quick comment about the virtualization. I think that today, most of the cloud vendors, right, are relying on at least derived KVM hypervisor, and KVM is open source, right? And this is the answer to any possible doubt around the KVM hypervisor that could come from people today leveraging proprietary virtualization solution, right? Cloud vendors for sure have more VMs, more physical systems distributed worldwide, and for sure a more complex architecture to manage compared to any other. And they are running KVM or a derived KVM hypervisor.
Benny?
Yeah, to kind of expand on that, if you look at how virtualization software is used, if I talk about open source projects in general, when we say this is how you can contribute, we've got like the general ideas. Virtualization is so how do I say it? It's so technical that if you've got developers that have any kind of free time and they have some virtualization knowledge, send them over there. Like that's so deep, and those sorts of things need the programming experience that I don't have. Right. That's what they need. They don't need marketing so much. They need programming.
A lot of coffee in that case,
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
Yes. Send people coffee, for sure.
Neil?
Yeah, I think all that for sure. And testing and using things in kind of weird places is definitely helpful as well. Like there's a whole lot of support in KVM QEMU for weird architectures that are still running, like X390X, PowerPC, and now RISC-V is coming in and being a thing. And it goes back to that, like, don't just work around it, report the bug, fix it, try and work on these things. So if you're finding a bug in KVM or QEMU, there's probably a big chance that you at least have some knowledge of what's going on. And that's how you also learn more about those things. Like, you don't become an expert in virtualization overnight. You become it by, like, running a bunch of S traces on KVM, seeing where shit's failing. Stuff's failing, sorry. But there was, I think a lot of the projects too, like Overt is a great project. Proxmox is great. One of my favorites is XCP-NG, which is based on Zen. It's one of the evolutions of Zen server after Citrix also made some licensing changes back in the day a few years ago. So there's a great history there, and a number of projects that can use your help in a development aspect as well as a user aspect, and just trying it out, using it, seeing how you like it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, just as a disclaimer, that we can mention other projects. We can curse, we can say bad words, no big deal. We don't censor anything here, but we don't say that there are better than Open Nebula. That's the only thing that you failed, but that's okay. In any case, jokes aside, in any case, I would like to go back a little bit to the complicated conversation right now that we started at some point, but let's go back to the complicated part of this panel, and the situation is that we have the situation with CentOS, we have the situation with Red Hat, we have now a nice situation with VMware. So what will be, in your opinion, or from your perspective, what will be a good strategy for migrate from proprietary options from people like VMware or other proprietary solutions to an open source virtualization solution? I mean, we mentioned VMware, we mentioned Proxmox, we mentioned XCP, but why? Oh, Kitty, yeah. But why Kitties are allowed as well? Okay, are allowed. No big deal. But what will be your suggestion in terms of migrating to another solution, and probably ideally to an open source solution? Tough topic. Benny, you are my savior.
Sure. I think this one was a Neil question, but I'm still going to give it a go. So I think anytime you're setting up this kind of stuff, there's like a standard set of practices that you need to go through, right? You start with testing and documenting your processes in a way that is replicable and is not, hopefully you set up your infrastructure that you're not, having to deal with a bunch of what-off sort of situations, right? So you start with testing, but part of that testing, I think, has to be, deciding when you're deciding which project, you have to define for your company, for you, what things are important about that project. If they're active, or they have a bunch of sponsors, or they have a bunch of, you can get like commercial support for it, like whatever the thing that is most important for you, you have to make sure to think about those things before you're using the project because you like it and it's cool. Like those can't be the only lines. You got to start with something much more practical, because ideally you're going to set yourself up in a situation where you can use this project for a long time, assuming the project doesn't pull something that you have to adjust for. And then once you're on it, you can go back to being a good open source citizen and start contributing. So you want to pick something that you really like, that's worth it.
Yeah, Simon, I think that.
Yeah, I agree with.
I'm changing the order randomly. Sorry.
Yeah.
For that.
Perfect.
Yeah, but this time Benny anticipated both myself and Neil, I think, right?
That's not fair. You have to express yourself.
Yeah, by the way, at that point is obviously an important one, right? You need to first understand which one is your target, which kind of or which level of support you need, right? If a community level of support is enough, or maybe you also need the enterprise support coming from a vendor. And obviously, one is not going to exclude the second one. The first one is not going to exclude the second one. You can even get access to a solution where, let's say, the support is going to be optional. So the support coming from an enterprise vendor is going to be optional. And again, you're going to leverage an open source solution. While talking about virtualization, at the end, I think that the two most important hypervisors in the open source ecosystem today are KVM and Zen hypervisor, right? And if we look at the desktop virtualization, we can also maybe mention VirtualBox. I'm not doing any kind of highlight. I do not want to highlight any Oracle product because I could also talk about the other stuff, but I'm not going to do that just because VirtualBox is there for many different years, and it's a great product in my opinion for desktop virtualization. By the way, coming back to the question, KVM or Zen, identify the proper management platform, understand which kind of level of support you need. And so at that point, you can understand if you need, let's say, an enterprise level support, you need to identify an open source project where there's, let's say, an important vendor behind, or at least one important. You can also find projects where there are more than one, obviously. And based on that, proceed, right? Related to also the migration, in the open source, you can find more than one solution able to migrate your stuff or your VMs from VMware, right, to the open source virtualization solution.
Yeah, I don't want to say something, but yeah, Neil, but just as a comment, sorry, Neil. Many of us, and I think that if not everyone, we started with virtualization and using virtualization tools with VirtualBox. So I think that it's I want to mention this because this is something that we always forget about it, and VirtualBox was some product of Oracle, or at least was acquired by Oracle at some point. So it's something that it's also important and still available to use. And Oracle didn't change anything, and that's something that that I would like to mention. Sorry, Neil. This is the disclaimer that I need to say, and this is your question. Yes, this is your question. So you go ahead and take the blame.
I think Simon and Benny hit a lot of the points that I had on my little mind palace thing here. Really, I think like the strategies are you can migrate. You should definitely test what you're migrating to. When I've done this in the past, even just reevaluating, should we continue with Zen or move to KVM or something else when the some of the stuff with Citrix happened back in the day. Making sure that we understand how the things work and not just looking and saying, oh, well, the grass looks like it's greener over there, so let's go eat that grass. Because it's often not, or if it is, don't know what they put in the soil. But there's a really good case to understand like your product requirements too. If you are able to, it might even make sense to look at multiple of these sorts of solutions and deploy them in tandem so that you are hedging against if a project were to change, or if you have an issue with one of the things. You can say, oh, well, only affected half our data center. You're still able to continue because you distribute your applications across multiple different hypervisors and are resilient to failure in that way. And it's not going to make sense for everyone, of course, but there's a plethora of tools and utilities available. XCP-ng has some utilities to import directly from VMware, with VDKs or VMDKs and such. So yeah, there's a whole lot of stuff in the ecosystem. And again, that goes back to like, if you find something that you're using and it's something that you rely on, you should be supporting that by giving them feedback, by paying them, by, maybe it's a project that you've used and has one maintainer. Maybe you should pay that person, right? Like maybe you should hire them. I don't know. There's a whole number of things there that should be thought of when you're using an open source project that you rely on and that especially if you're making money on it.
Okay, cool. And I think that we need to go start thinking on closing. So I'm gonna use the same approach that my colleague Jordi did at one of the panels yesterday, and it was kind of describing in one sentence, which is something that it forces you to think twice what you will say. Describing one sentence, how do you see the virtual machine ecosystem right now, especially after we mentioned about the situation with VMware, because it's trendy, so that's the situation. But describe the virtualization open source ecosystem in one sentence. How do you see? I will say probably, what do you want to see in the virtualization ecosystem? That's a tricky question that I made up right now. So who wants to start?
You should go in the reverse of how we opened.
Who opens? I cannot remember who opens. Simon goes first.
Yeah, Simon.
Okay, Simon.
So what I would like to see, I would like to see more trust in open source while talking about virtualization. One thing that I always said to everyone, so VMware works great, right? We cannot say anything different than that. We know. And this is why they've been so successful in the years. But today, it seems that there are so many companies and even people maybe looking for an alternative. And yeah, in my opinion, while looking at the alternatives, one great move that you could do is the one of getting on an open source solution. And maybe the first reason is the one that getting on an open source solution is not going to get you in the same situation in the next future.
Okay. Cool. Neil, you're on next.
Yeah, I think the thing I'd really like to see in the virtualization space is just more standardized support for all of the different distributions. There's a whole number of CSPs out there that do bespoke images for their cloud that need to do something specific so that it works for their cloud. And there's probably some fundamental issues there somewhere in the virtualization stack that are causing that to need to happen, but it leads to a situation where there's there's not Fedora images places because people don't want to maintain them, and there's Rocky or Alma, but not both sometimes. There's these whole category of problems. I think that could be solved by just communicating. So that's what I'd like to see.
Okay, cool. Benny?
Yeah, I think for me, I think what we're going to see is a lot more energy, like we have with the enterprise Linux ecosystem. A lot more energy, a lot more excitement in both meanings of the word. And what I'm hoping that leads to is a lot more involvement, a lot more collaboration, a lot more improvements. A lot of things that we have had to put up with for a long time that we don't have to put up with anymore.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think it's a good closing. It's a kind of a song of hope for the open source. So thanks everyone. Thanks Simon. Thanks Benny. Thanks Neil for participating in this, to accept the invitation first, to accept to be kind of messed up for being in this panel. The agenda, let me check, because I need to double check the agenda right now, but I think that the agenda is closing in the next session. Yes, that we have 2 more panels, so stay with us. We will have one session about private 5G and multi-edge cloud with open source power. So we have more open source in the power in the next sessions. And again, thanks everyone for being here. Thanks to people for watching, and the panelists for participating in this panel. So see you in another virtualization world. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.